Well, good morning, everybody. In today's video, I kind of want to bookend this with some international weather, and I'm going to start you off in Europe. There is a powerful storm system that is moving through like the British Isles into the North Sea and eventually toward the Scandinavian countries. And there's a sequence of these coming across the North Atlantic. And the setup here across the North Atlantic is pretty interesting to me right now, given what's going on with the hurricane season, a major change in the North Atlantic oscillation, which is usually something I focus a lot on in winter. But look at the winds just ripping across this part of the North Atlantic into the North Sea here over the next 10 days or so. You add it all up and look at the cumulative wind gusts in miles per hour. We've got numerous places that are going to be hitting 50, 60, 70 miles an hour with these winds right through this area. So just something to think about. Now, this is a part of a bigger change that I think is happening across the Atlantic Ocean. And you can see it here first by checking out the jet stream level winds. Some of the winds going through this area were approaching 200 miles an hour in the jet stream, okay? And it's interesting just to see how you've got, a high here and a trough there and in between, just the atmosphere firing the flow through. What's going on is a major temperature gradient from here to here in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. It starts at the surface, but by what's called the thermal wind relationship, you get your largest pressure gradient throughout the depth of the atmosphere, driving the jet stream level winds. Now, this is something we talk a whole lot more about in winter, but I mean, for late summer, this is a potent setup. Now, let's take a look at some other things going on in the Atlantic, which, by the way, before I go off of this map, this is the trough associated with all the cool air that has moved into the central United States and is pushing east. But if we step down in the atmosphere, let's go down to 850, just as an example. There's several things that I want to be on the lookout for here going forward. We saw the naming of Dexter, a tropical system here. But I'm watching carefully what's coming off of Africa right now. Now, for the last several weeks, we've talked about how the tropics have been relatively suppressed, not a whole lot going on. But what we do take note of here, just looking at the low-level winds, is as we kind of step this forward, the models are attempting to develop something, a little wave right in through this area. And we're going to question where this is possibly going to go. We're going to get a lot of our advice from the National Hurricane Center, given that it is the most trusted and most reliable source for hurricane information. But we're going to look at the models as well. Now, one thing to take note of here, if you just said, hey, Eric, you go on and on about Bermuda High and all this kind of stuff, right? Take a look at this, the sheer size of the flow coming across the Atlantic. It's amazing to look at this. History of a lot of the Western world as it relates to Europe and Africa, it was written by these winds. And what I mean by that is, these were the winds that basically, these are called the trade winds, which took trade from here and here across the Atlantic, and this is where Europe and Africa, how these peoples got into South America, what's called the West Indies, and the New World, and then the flow took them back. And that Bermuda High is such a critical part of the history of the world with respect to how peoples moved about, right? So I just think it's fascinating to look at that. But coming back to the weather, this is a look at the newest update from the National Hurricane Center. A lot of us meteorologists were commenting over the weekend on the sheer size of the area that is given a 50% chance of development here. It was a much, much bigger cone of a possibility when you looked at this data over the weekend. The only active system now is called Dexter, and Dexter's forecast is to remain currently a tropical storm. I think they're expecting winds to get up and sustain themselves around 50, maybe 55 miles an hour, moving north of Bermuda, kind of staying out to open ocean, which overall is a favorable thing, except for shipping routes that go through this area. Now, I believe with Dexter, we will see planes fly around it, but it is possible maybe that a couple of them can go over the top of Dexter. Be interesting to watch that. But there's other stuff going on, and I want to show you in the models here what the probability of tropical depression formation looks like over the next 10 days from the European model. As you play it out, again, we're going to keep an eye on this. Now, some of the models, like the operational European from this morning, are attempting to take whatever comes out of this, what we call African easterly wave, and send it here. Now, the ensembles are clearly not doing that, but we need to keep an eye out on that. It's mainly day 10 through 15 that we could see that. Most of the ensemble members are taking this farther, to the north, but we need to keep an eye out on this. We can actually stitch all of the ensemble members together and kind of get an idea on what's going on here. And there's a couple questions I have. So, for example, you see Dexter. There's all of Dexter and the model's projection of where Dexter could go. We continue to watch development of tropical low pressure off the Carolina and Georgia coast. And then we kind of see two waves, right? You have this one, and then there's something behind it. And I think it's that thing behind it that the models are keying in on, maybe getting over toward the Lesser Antilles, which are these islands, and the Greater Antilles, which are these. In the near term, I do not see any development in the Gulf, right? I mean, you see, wait, there's a couple of lows in there, but there's nothing robust showing up in the Gulf that we're overly concerned about at this point. So we're going to watch the Atlantic carefully going forward. Okay, why is this happening? Well, bigger narrative. Right now, if you just look right here, this is the area that we knew at the end of July and the very beginning of August was going to temporarily have the lid taken off. So we're looking again at what are called velocity potentials. These colors represent where air is rising, so here, now, and here later. And this is where we expect air to sink. Now, whenever you see air sinking, that tends to be a suppression on tropical activity. So where is this geographically? Well, right now, see this here. It's over the top of where the Atlantic develops, or even the East Pacific. We have activity in the Eastern Pacific as well. But the curiosity where I think we're all going to have here is, does this come through and squash for a lot of August, the tropical season, in the Atlantic or maybe in the Pacific, while the best rising motion goes here into the Indian Ocean, something Matt and I hammered away at all of last week, right? We talked a lot about this MJO movement and whether or not it is a significant driver of the near-term pattern. I bring that up because August isn't typically a busy month for tropical systems. It just is. And even with suppression, you can get tropical systems to form. And so I wouldn't make this like a binary yes-no thing in your head, just because I say there's suppression coming. We're still going to have to watch the tropics and see how they produce systems. Now, that's a quick update on the tropics. So you've seen the bigger features we're discussing. There's Dexter right there, okay? This was yesterday's satellite data. Many of us throughout the weekend in the upper Midwest getting into the Northeast, including Ontario and Quebec, had major air quality issues. You probably saw some of the reports listing cities with the worst air quality in the country, mainly from the wildfire smoke being sourced from two areas. One's the Canadian Prairie, mainly getting to Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then the other, the fires that are in the southwestern United States. We saw some pretty nasty storms that rolled through the plains yesterday, a couple of these producing very large hail, which I'll show you in a moment, and tornadoes. We can see the widespread rain that's in parts of the southeast. Now, these storms yesterday were honestly hit or miss in some folks, despite the widespread cloud cover, but we did get decent rains out of those as well. Into the northwest, love seeing this. We need to get these afternoon storms cranking. In this area, it's very typical for this time of year to see it, and I think it's going to be important to understanding wildfire threat going forward. The thunderstorms out west are very tricky if you've never experienced them before. They're very high-based. They're popping off the mountains. Some of them produce rain that never gets to the surface. We call that virga, but they can produce lightning, which can initiate fires. And as you can see, there have been several wildfires that have shown up not only in the Four Corners states, but also Nevada and parts of California as well. If we zoom in on that area just to show you these fires yesterday, all right, let's kind of just take this out towards sunset so we can see them a little bit better. I've got several here in Colorado, in New Mexico, the one we've been watching for weeks in Arizona, and this one in Utah. Large fire in northern Nevada, and fires that are here just kind of north of the LA basin, pretty far north of it, into this area. A lot of that wildfire smoke was spreading throughout much of the southwestern United States. We've seen fires in Northern California. There's been some in Washington as well, and Oregon, but I wanted to focus in on these newer fires here. The National Weather Service at Vegas tweeted out a video. This is kind of neat. This is from the fire that I just showed you down there in Southern California. Just kind of get a view of what these look like. So the satellite's showing you the top of this, okay? And you're getting a little bit of deep convection rolling over the top of it, but these are some large fires. We need to continue to watch carefully to see how they spread as we go forward into this season. Now, the other large area that we've been talking about for months has been in Canada, and I've got good news for these fires, again, in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. This was a couple of days ago. Look at this. We did get some deeper storms forming in the wildfire smoke. But as we let the overnight hours go on, look at all of the signatures of the fires here using the infrared. And that's why yesterday, this would be Sunday, you can see just prolific wildfire smoke spreading again all the way through Ontario into Quebec and even into the Northeast after spending the weekend over the Great Lakes states, just as an example. But this was yesterday, just before the sunset. Watch that. That is incredible to see just how much wildfire smoke is in that area. Now, I said I had some good news for this area, and I'm going to show you just an animation here of total accumulated precipitation. There's a low that's forming off of a trough in the upper atmosphere here and a surface low pressure system there. It's going to be moving across Canada. Can you see it coming through here? This week, getting into this weekend. And as we get into the weekend, we're expecting coming out of Saskatchewan into Manitoba. I mean, I'm kind of rocking back and forth over the weekend into early next week, and some of the models are putting down, this is in millimeters, by the way, but it's inches of rainfall on top of where these fires are expected. Now, I'm very hopeful that this is going to be something that can suppress a lot of this fire activity, but that low is going to be critical to this area. You also take note of how active the northern plains of the United States are likely going to be during this setup too, starting really in Montana, but getting into the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and possibly Nebraska and Wisconsin as well. But until then, we still have a lot of wildfire smoke to deal with. And this is just the 48-hour forecast of vertically integrated smoke. And it's continuing to show a picture of pretty widespread wildfire smoke coming from both the west and from Canada. All right, from here, just want to give you this morning's all hazards weather map. We have red flag warnings out for parts of the Four Corners states up into Wyoming and this side of the Snake River Valley. This is excessive heat watches and warnings down here in the southwest. Dense fog here, but this is all wildfire smoke spreading across this northern tier of the U.S. into the northeast. And we have flood watches out for parts of Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. Now, thinking this through, I did want to show you something here. I'm about to show you a map that looks at some recent precipitation. And before I do that, I'm waiting on some new data. We're going to look at this later this week. But if I had to pick out a state, a big ag state that is absolutely firing on all cylinders, it is Iowa. And the NDVI values at the end of July were setting new records. And honestly, it's not just Iowa. It's this whole surrounding area around Iowa that is the best we've ever seen in terms of what it looks like from space. So I would just say this spot right here, incredible, because most of the heavy rains were perfectly timed for when the crop can take it. That makes sense, right? Early in the season, it can be problematic. The crop's going rapidly through its vegetative stages. The root structure is not fully developed. You can get a lot of soil erosion. Late in the season, it's very problematic for stand quality. It's very problematic for, harvest efforts. But if you nail it in July, my goodness, I mean, that's it. So by the way, these are the July stats. This is the entire month of July. So early season record flooding here. We watched an area go over drier for a lot of the month there. Also, this part just until recently was pretty dry. The northeast was dry, and then the west, except for storms that came rolling through here. This is where we saw the greatest development of drought during the month of July. So just wanted to point those stats out. We looked at a little bit on Friday, but wanted to give you another update of it here today because I did not show you the new drought monitor. Now, the drought monitor change has been amazing this summer. We have just seen drought massively shrink in the central U.S. So all of the major river basins in the central U.S. since the start of spring till now have seen significant drought reduction. The east as well. Yeah, but you come into the west, we saw just a big Pacific high that lived here that sent a lot of just flow over the top, which met the Bermuda high, which was coming around in this direction, which is why we saw this area, go drier. Now, drier, but not extensively hot. So it was an interesting summer to see the dryness without prolonged excessive heat in the western United States. All right, one last way to put this together. I just want to show you, this is just the last 2 weeks, and I want to keep an eye on this region specifically. And we've seen it drier at times. I think the upcoming forecast is not overly generous for rainfall in that area. But you can see where the most active corridor is. Okay, it's this spot, right through here that's been most active on getting the storms to roll through. Now, the minus 10,000s and the minus 777s, these are just ways by which when the data are missing, I can code a number so I can tell you that there's no data here. That's all that we're doing. But that's your last 2 weeks on total precip, looking at it as a percent of normal. So the upcoming forecast, I'm going to be watching carefully this low that rolls through this area. There's the heavy rain that we need to get on top of those fires, but this will be dragging fronts through this corridor. Now, over the southeast, it remains very, very wet. We're going to watch Dexter leave, and we're going to talk more about anything coming out of the tropics in a minute. Very weak signal out of the monsoon. And if you're watching me and you're from Arizona, what was our narrative all spring? We thought, that there was going to be more persistent ridging in this area that was going to drive the monsoon by having the flow come around it and lows off the California coast feeding this, and it has not materialized. We've just not seen it. And instead, over the next several days, I'll be watching kind of a corridor in through here that could be drier. It's shown up in many models. Now, speaking of model data, I worked on something a little bit over the weekend. I'm trying to perfect this. I don't like my current color bar. I'll be honest, I borrowed most of this color bar from a famous website, Tropical Tidbits. I just re-engineered it a little bit. But Levi Cowan's website, it is awesome. He's the man. So I went to my other colleague, Dr. Ryan Maui, and I looked at his color bar, and I wanted to borrow it. And so I've been working on some new stuff, and that's not it. Where did I put it? Well, shoot. Okay, can I show you this in a minute? I'm a little off in my cadence. I apologize. Color bar more in a minute. First, forgive me there. I want you to see kind of the near-term issue with the way the pattern's set up. Storms in the high plains again today. So here, tomorrow, there, and again. See this? Now, we have chances for storms everywhere that you see the shading. But I want to focus in on this area. And here's the reason. Sorry, I got this out of order for you. If you watch yesterday's storms, see how they're peeling out of the north and heading toward the south? That's going to be a common trajectory. This idea of doing something like that with time while the southeast continues to deal with a lot of scattered showers and storms. Now, this is the near term, forgive me. So just right now going through. These storms yesterday were pretty nasty. These were the hail reports from those storms yesterday I mentioned I'd show you. So look how streaky they were over the weekend with putting down some places baseball-sized hail and larger. Now, with all of that being said, let's take a look at where the near-term forecast is taken. Now, you just watch as I play this forward. High-res NAM, simulated radar reflectivity. Do you see that same behavior? Watch the storms peel off in the central U.S. heading toward the south. See that? I'll go back and forth over it. So we have our scattered storms in the southeast. We have this weak low that's moving through Montana. That's the first low that comes up here to help bring in some rain. The second one's behind it coming in later this weekend. But just you'll see storms coming over the top like this while we have scattered storms over parts of the south and east. Again, watch it. Now, the NAM is trying to do something significant here. We're going to talk about this throughout the week. It could be an overnight event on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. This is a common time of year for squall lines that persist overnight, bow echoes. We have to pay close attention to them. They can ride on top of the boundary layer through the evening and overnight hours and survive, and we'll just keep an eye on those. So don't take this one model run as, holy cow, I better look out if I'm in Omaha, but we'll watch it carefully, Now, back to where I screwed up my cadence, I want to show you this, all right? So I was working on a new color bar, and I was looking at my colleagues that make maps, and I really liked the one that comes from Weather Bell and also Weather Underground, which Dr. Ryan Maui was kind of a pioneer in making those maps. So tell me what you think, and you can comment on this if you want. I switched my precipitation forecast maps to look like this. So instead of these colors, which I find, as my wife puts it, a bit muted in through here, where you have this huge range of a 1/2 inch to 4 inches, it's kind of hard to see the delineation of it, to this. And I'm going to get this going live on the server soon, but this is the next 10 days of precip. Now, what I'm also doing is I'm putting a hard contour, a black line, see it right in there, at 1 inch. And you'll have the ability to hover over the numbers rather than kind of cluttering them with values at specific cities that I chose. I don't know. I kind of like this, but I also just like the ability to be interactive with the map. So take a look. That is needed. There is the storms coming through the upper Midwest. Here's the very wet weather that the models are predicting in the southeast, and I'm quite concerned about over the next week what could be happening here. Now, we know that last year, in late fall, we had Hurricane Helene, one of the most unique hurricane tracks that kind of eventually did something like this. But when it made that turn into the Appalachian Mountains, we were drawing surface flow that came around like this, came around like that, and off the Atlantic here, and just threw the moisture up perpendicular to the mountains after 3 days of heavy rainfall preceding Hurricane Helene. Now, this is not a hurricane. This is just the model kicking out the ability for the atmosphere over the next week or so to possibly put down very heavy rains in parts of Georgia. Georgia, North, South Carolina, mainly North Carolina, Virginia. So please be aware of this. Now you notice, though, there is a corridor in through here that's going to be relatively dry. Most of the action's here or down in the southeast. We're not expecting in the southwest, and I've told you the monsoon is pathetic right now. It's not going. So that's kind of the bigger picture. Tell me in the comments if you like the color bar or not. I don't know. I like it. I don't know. I think I'm going to stick around with it. And just tell me. Anyway, that system I keep mentioning going across Canada, where is it right now? Well, take a look at what's going on with the Pacific High. Again, it is just as expansive as the Bermuda High is over in the Atlantic. And there are many lows that are just several of these little lows that are to the north of it, and a big one in the Bering Sea. Now, what I'm going to be watching carefully is how the low that you saw here is going to interact with this upper level low to come together and get across, well, not there, but here in the Canadian Prairie. So have a look at it. Here's today's European model run. There's all the heavy rain we're expecting through the middle of this week down in the southeast. And you can see the first system, sorry, I switched my view. First system coming out of Montana, curling into the Canadian Prairie, the eastern Canadian Prairie, and dragging a front. So by late this week, we could get some rains through the Midwest. Now here's the bigger system that came into the northwest by Saturday, spinning here in southern Saskatchewan, Alberta, getting into Montana and North Dakota. And that's the one that goes up and soaks possibly this area that's on fire right now. There's the front that it drags through later this week. So we're going to keep an eye on the potential for some heavy rain there. But as it moves through, as we get out there toward the end of the 10-day time period, there's a lot of storm activity that's hitting this quarter of the U.S. following that system that just went through. So if you look at it, here's the probabilities. So the chance at going over an inch in the next 10 days, quite high here and in the upper Midwest. There's the drier corridor that I mentioned. We'll look at that again in a second. Not that it's dry, but drier. But this area down here we got to take a look at. If I step this up to 2 inches, I get a new model run, of course. Let's go back and take you out 10 days. That's the probability of 2 inches of rain. And you see the probability of 4. So while the operational European model is very aggressive on the flooding here, remember that the ensemble's still showing 2, 4, 5 inches of rain possible. Please be aware of the flooding threat here because of the damage Helene did last year. On the drier side of this, here's who stays under a half inch. So we've got most of the west. We will see storms here, isolated storms in through this area, but there's a corridor in through here of drier conditions that I think is just drier, not dry, over these next several days. The dry spots are in the southwest, where I don't expect anything. Okay, from there, I want to give you the week 2 forecast. They're all across the top here from our models. There's the CPC update, European model, artificial intelligence, and the GFS ensemble. And I just take note that out there that far, most of the models are drier throughout the plains. Okay, there's a signal there that's showing drier. We're trying to distill into why that might be. So you see, here's the pattern over this week. There's the big low that's going through. That's going to hopefully help with those fires. But as you get out into next week, look at this. The models lose it. There's no strong signal here, right? It's washed out. So I'm a bit skeptical on this because the AI model suggests that there's going to be a much more dominant ridge over the next 15 days setting up in the North Pacific, driving more frequent troughs through here, of which we expect to see one by this weekend. Overall, though, the main jet is way up to the north. And I think that's going to be critical trying to figure out where this August temperature and precipitation pattern is going to go. So I would just tell you right now, maybe take these forecasts with a grain of salt. I think that they've lost a signal to tell you what the midsection of the country is going to be getting going forward. And so we'll maybe take one more stab at that at the end of this video. Temperature-wise, this is how July finished. That's the whole month. So honestly, the plains, despite the heat that you saw late in July, you average it out and you're near normal. It was very hot east, very hot in the southeast. But in the west, the marine stratocumulus layer kept a lot of coastal California cool. The Willamette Valley was hotter at times, so was the Columbia Basin. But you're not going to look at this and say that was a hot July. Last year was a hot July for the western United States. August started off like that. About the only spot that was extremely hot was down in Florida. And, the start of August still here, top 4. Very, very hot, but very cool air. Although it was drier, it was very smoky that moved into this area to start this new month. Southwest did stay pretty hot. The area that kind of encapsulates Phoenix here, 6th hottest start to an August on record so far. So what are the temperatures doing? You're going to see quite a bit of heat in this area. So watch, this is Monday's temperatures. Getting into Tuesday, up the front range, 100 degrees. Now, we will see storms popping on this. You saw them. They're going to cascade in this direction, right? But be aware of the heat that's going to be there, while the southeast, being so wet, is expecting to get some cooler conditions here. West still doesn't bring in the heat until later this week. Wednesday into Thursday, the Central Valley starts to warm up. But there's a system later this week that's coming through here. And watch the temperatures behind this system. So extremely hot here. But by the time we get to Friday and Saturday, see the front coming through. So a big warm-up that's happening here to the Great Lakes this week. Very hot in this region. But as we play it forward, that front's going to drive some cooler temperatures into place. Now, just as I showed you with the ensembles trying to pick up what the week 2 pattern is going to be, the temperatures are washed out too. So there's the next 5 days. There's the heat we expected to see building in. A little cooler in this area, cooler in the southeast. But day 10 through 15, it just washes it out. And it's trying to place the best jet stream level winds way up here. That's why Alaska is cooler. So I'm going to tell you, be aware that this pattern may have more fluctuation in temperatures than what you see here, even though the models have kept it warm and trended warm for this kind of mid-August time frame. Okay. Now, beyond this, the CPC forecast for August was released on Friday, and this is what they're calling for. And it's a very weak southwestern monsoon signal, which tells me to tell you, don't expect dominant ridges just to live in the midsection of the country. They got it hot and they got it drier in that area. Now, this is a pretty solid forecast for precip in the southeast because the beginning of August is going to start off so very wet here. But we'll have to watch for the end of August and how it might transition in the southeast given the tropical activity, given the position and strength of the Bermuda High. All of these are factors. I'm going to show you the European model outlook for mid-August to mid-September. Matt, I kind of hit on this last week looking at drier analogs for this section of the country. It's still showing up there, slightly drier, but I'll be honest. Have we really been dry over that whole area for months? Now, you noted that, hey, we've had pockets move in here, and you've seen that in the last 14 days, and I just showed you that moving forward, we're drier in this area. But despite me even saying drier, storms continue to kind of cascade in pockets into this area. So I can't look at this and say, hey, look out, repeat of 2024, which is when in late August and start of September, this went absolutely bone dry. We don't see that happening. But this is the new, mid-August to mid-September outlook from the European model. All right. What I'm going to be watching for is seen here. Color coding is not temperature, it's pressure anomalies. So there's Dexter, okay? As I play this forward, the warmer colors represent higher pressure. So there's the big dominant high middle of this week that continues to move east, taking the smoke with it, okay? Now, as we go forward, this is now Thursday into Friday and Saturday. So there's Dexter. There's the next low that comes through. Remember that one that's going to drop the front? You can see it. But what I'll keep an eye on is just the presence overall of the Bermuda high pressure system, which even into early next week, it's still here. And then I want to know what the tropics are going to do, because it suggests in the European operational run that this second area of low pressure, which we talked about 15 minutes ago, could move into the Lesser Antilles. And this is just one of those setups where if the Bermuda High does wander off over here, all right, then this guy has better chances of developing under lower shear conditions. And it'll be interesting to see if something like this does take shape. That's mid-August. But it does appear that in the near term that we're going to have to be talking more about the tropics going forward, despite the suppression in the atmosphere that I mentioned a while ago. So I don't know. I'm not settled on this August pattern. And just remember, last year when September and October turned dry, we didn't fully see the implications of that until late August. So I do not believe we've got a clear picture on where this fall pattern is going to go. I do think the fact that the trade winds have continued and this La Nina signal is still there. That's a drier signal in the midsection of the country. That's a wetter signal here. That's a more active signal across parts of the southeast. But it's not set in stone because of how warm the North Pacific is. I mean, just look at the warmth of the water here. Now, the Atlantic is primed for a hurricane season. It's very, very warm in the Atlantic right now. We're going to have to keep watching that. But I'm curious if we'll get some Niña effects out of it. We're clearly very INSO-neutral now, okay? But take a look at this late fall, early winter setup by the CFSV2 model. That's kind of the only model that's updated recently. I'll get a new European model forecast tomorrow. Hopefully Matt will be able to cover it, but although I doubt it'll be released early enough for him in the morning. But there you go. And just so you know, the CFSV2, which is not a model I tend to trust, do you see how it's giving you the drier signal there, as I mentioned, and a wetter signal here? That's that La Nina look, and possibly wetter there, especially as you go into September, October, November, and October, November, December. Now, the model is attempting to give us like this full-on, winter setup with La Nina. See that? That's La Nina to the T. Active North Pacific jet diving in and exiting, that's where you get your most activity. So we're going to let that just be a thought process. But as we watch the development of this feature, this is going to be critical for South America as well. And I want to point something out to you as this resets. If we look at Brazil, all of Brazil, and just look at how well the safrinha crop finished in May and June. It was the highest NDVI on record there too. And we just want to know, as we go forward, how will these rains come back into Brazil as the monsoon starts? Because as we think about it, there has been above average rainfall in this corridor lately. Argentina's been drier this winter, but we're going to watch to see how the monsoon gets going later on this year. This, by the way, is a 10-day forecast map from the European model. So I'll leave you here. You now know the setup for what I think Matt and I are going to be discussing this week in these forecast videos. We're going to try to clue in on what the rest of August and September and October may look like. But with that, I'll just wrap it up. Tell you to have a great week, and we'll talk in the morning. Thanks.